And we are back. Welcome back to Kingsport Friday, November 17th, 2017, broadcasting live to all the kings and queens of the kingdom. And here we are today, we're joined as our special guest with Helmut Gustav Hensen. Did I say that right, Helmut?
Perfect.
I'm sorry if I butchered that. Helmut is currently a marketing consultant with Spring Hill Laser Services, a total fulfillment marketing company. He's, of course, married to his wonderful wife for 41 years. Beautiful, amazing. 3 sons, all married, 4 granddaughters, former director of a national marketing company, 112 offices, studied and taught in Europe and South America, undergraduate and graduate degrees, plus seminary degree, senior instructor at the U.S. Army Chaplain Academy, senior instructor at the U.S. Army Chaplain School, Christian school administrator to 1,000 students, was a board member at various sports ministries, elder and church missions director, business owner, camping program director, biking and wilderness stress camping, NRA, and game hunting instructor. Wow. Amazing. Helmut, you've done it all. You've done it all. Now, of course, thank you so much, of course, for joining us this morning. It's always a pleasure to see you, my friend. We are dealing with such incredible depravity, which has now come to the open. You know, when could you turn on CNN and hear the endless array of pedophile scandals that are coming out? You had CNN just a few months ago, about a year or two ago, trying to justify pedophilia. The left was trying to move after they justified homosexuality, after they justified transgenderism, after they justified every which way of sexual deviance they can think of. Now they were trying to justify minor attraction syndrome, which is more known as pedophilia. But they were trying to label it minor attraction syndrome, saying that it's not a crime, it's a disease, and we should have compassion for the sick, you see. We should have, you remember how they did this with homosexual agenda too? Have compassion for the sick. It's not their choice. They're born that way. It's biological, this whole argument. It's the same repeated argument, but now for more deviant forms of sexual, immoral, depraved acts. You have this situation even today, top news, married science teacher 22 arrested for sex romp with teenage boy, where she was luring these young students of hers into an apartment with candlelit lights off, ready to have sexcapades with her students. And you see this now happening more and more. And of course she was arrested. And of course she should be as well. Tell us about your opinion about, of course, the current state of affairs, how America has fallen from its biblical roots as a founding, and let us know your thoughts about the current state of America's morality, and why would morality be important for a nation or civilization? Helmut.
Well, yeah, having a varied background. For me, it changes about every 8 to 10 years. And being at my age of 71, I haven't figured out yet what I'm going to do when I grow up. So, but
well, you look great for 71.
Thanks. But having started off really as a mechanical contractor, and then realizing there's more to life than just making money and going to a job, investing my life into children and kids, went back to college. Ended up being a coach and a teacher, and taught for 2 years in public school. Hated it.
Really? Wow.
The principal changed the grades of 2 of my students.
Whoa.
And they said, well, you can't fail them. He thought I was being a wise guy. When he asked, I was young and just out of college, and he said, why did you give them an F, these 2 students? I said, well, when they don't show up for class and they're disruptive and they think I'm a supply house, that's the lowest grade I could give them. And he thought I was being a smart aleck. And but anyway, he changed the grades, and I said, I'm wasting my time here. So I decided to go back into business, but ended up actually working at another Christian school, about 1,000 students, and then moving into getting a graduate degree and moving into administration. You want to have changes made in education. Loved that. I mean, you had support of the parents. You had your own curriculum. You don't have the nonsense that's going on today.
Right.
And the sad part is most of the good teachers were leaving education. It was not just a job. And most of them had no idea of the history and the background with Horace Mann and John Dewey, who are both secular humanists.
Oh my gosh, yeah, Horace Mann.
And prior to that, all schools were either church-related or independent.
The Prussian educational system.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
And so just looking at some of the history and stuff, I had to educate them. They left the sugarcoating in, some Bible reading and prayer and so forth. But it became a joke. And when we actually moved up here, I wanted to raise our boys up outside of Philadelphia. And they said, why would you put them in a small private school? You're an educator. I said, I'm more concerned about the kind of people my sons are coming.
Yes.
Their character, the morality.
Yes.
If I want the teachers to be supporting, we're responsible for their education, not the school. That was a foreign concept to a lot of them. And I said, if they become the right kind of people, they can handle any situation. And it was interesting. One of my sons was going pre-med. He needed a couple courses for college. So in the last 2 years, we did transfer them over because of certain courses that they needed. And they said, oh, well, we have a hard time. It actually was a local school district, considered a very good school district. And the principal said, well, we'll put them on one of the lower sections because they came from this little school. The interesting part is they all tested out at 99 percentile nationally.
Wow.
I said, if they can't cut it, we've been paying taxes all this time, have not taken advantage of this. I said, if they can't cut it, move them down. Well, there's a lot of egos and going on. And knowing that, I said, well, if you don't have the authority or the ability to do that, I said, we pick and choose our battles. This will be one of them. And we'll just take it up to the next level of the board. It was interesting because of the egos involved from the administration. The next day they had their classes. Within 2 weeks, though, it was interesting. My oldest son, within 2 weeks after school, was picked to be the captain of the soccer team. He was president of the choir. The other one was picked to be involved in the leader in the musical and drama and so forth. At the end of that year, they received all kinds of accolades from the school. And what the school would do, they would pick the top 20 students and had the parents in. They would 5 at a time meet in front of the school board. And it was interesting, even the superintendent said, he said it was interesting that every one of the children that were brought forward had both parents.
Wow.
That was unusual. Mm-hmm. Now I know we're definitely in a minority now, having both parents.
That's right.
And just historically, I was thinking about I can't remember the gentleman's name. I have it written down. That came from France after the French Revolution. He was over here to study the penal system. But what fascinated him was they had already executed like 40,000 people in France. And when he was here back in the 1700s, he said he was amazed. What makes the United States unique was the Bible.
Yes.
And basing the Constitution and everything on that. So the uniqueness of the United States, it's like I'm thinking about the whole educational system. I have a copy of a test from 1895, what an 8th grader had to know to graduate from, to be a graduate of 8th grade. Most college students couldn't pass that test. It's really intimidating. But education, they were at age 14, at age 11, John Quincy Adams, our 6th president, son of John Adams, at age 11 spoke 4 languages fluently.
Yes, right.
And was also picked because of his ability and literacy, as a secretary to the delegation that went to France. At age 14, he was on the delegation.
11 years old.
Excuse me?
At that young of an age.
Well, the education was a lot better.
It was.
At age 14, he was on the delegation to Russia.
Isn't that amazing? 14 years old.
Right. And he was the guy that served as president, but he was the only president that ever came back and fulfilled the rest of his life serving in Congress. Mm-hmm. And he actually interacted with William Wilberforce in England to fight slavery. And he actually submitted, like over 600 bills in Congress to eliminate slavery.
Wow.
John Quincy. and it upset Congress because there was still a lot of conflict.
Well, there's a whole, people
Go ahead.
say, all the founding fathers were white supremacists and they loved owning slaves and the whole economy was built on them. It was only two-thirds did not own slaves. Did you know that? Two-thirds of the founding fathers did not own slaves.
Right.
And even George Washington, for example, he wanted to release his slaves immediately, but it was against the law in Virginia where he resided. So, of course, he did it in the fastest fashion that he could, because that is when you die, you release your slaves. But the whole notion that young people are brainwashed with all the founding fathers, these are all, white supremacists, they're all racist, they all exploiters of blacks, etc. But they never taught, for example, of the Arabian trans-Saharan slave trade, which was the most brutal slave trade, two-thirds of which were women. It was geared fully around sex slavery, which of course is legal in Islam and jihadis,
Right.
according to that entire Sharia law civilization. But you mentioned the biblical principles, because in school you're supposed to learn character building things, and not only this kind of brainwashing, this kind of mechanical, state-run, multiple question answering. You were actually taught critical thinking. You had biblical morality and critical thinking, really the foundations of Western civilization. And this was actually taught to people. Now you get these Antifa children who are graduating from high school and different colleges. They can't even string together a coherent sentence with logic at all. They just scream bigot and racist whenever they disagree.
One of the schools my son went to was Liberty University.
Oh wow, is that great?
Okay. And
God,
it was interesting. The Liberty, the liberal media really downplays it, but their debating team, for example, has beat out Princeton, Yale, Harvard.
Oh wow!
And it just shocked people. But you're talking about critical thinking and so forth.
Yeah.
They underestimate the education, but the problem a lot of times is because of the lack of that biblical basis, you don't have absolute standards anymore. Everybody's right, nobody's right.
It's relativism. It's totally relativism.
Right. You were talking about the slavery issue. Most people are familiar with Amistad, the ship, and that whole, when they tried those people, who was their legal for that? The defense attorney was John Quincy Adams.
There you go. There's Quincy
Right.
Adams again.
Now, the interesting part, there were 9 judges. 8 of them were slave owners.
Wow.
When he finished that trial, it was a unanimous decision by all 9 to free them.
Isn't that incredible?
That was just amazing, some of the things. But it was interesting that at the end of his life, and he was nationally recognized, there was a young congressman that came in, and they became very close. That young congressman was Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, I heard of Abe.
Yeah, and he was also the guy that eliminated, for at least for that time period, made the major step in removing slavery from our nation.
I mean, it was amazing just under the Obama administration. Just, DHS was releasing documents which they would train their people under, saying that the founding fathers would be designated as domestic terrorists. They would be designated as domestic terrorists in today's parlance and today's legal structure. Anybody who stood up for any type of sovereignty and or freedom and critical thought was labeled a domestic terrorist. In 2012, the FBI released a document saying how you can identify a potential terrorist. Some of them like, at the coffee shop, does the person use cash? Or is he an evangelical Christian? They were getting to the point where they were trying to make the argument that evangelical Christians, especially gun owners, were a domestic terrorist threat. And of course, that was the whole thing when they were trying to say guns are for hunting. And everybody, nobody should have guns, that can actually do them for their actual purpose. I mean, we had Larry Pratt on, the other executive director emeritus of Gun Owners America.
Right.
And he was explaining, no, guns, the right to bear arms is not for hunting.
Right.
It is, at its very core, just like in the Battle of Athens, Tennessee, to fight off a tyrannical government. That's what our founding fathers did. They fought off the Brits. They were British people living here. They were colonists. This was a colony of Britain. And they said, no more, no more, no more.
Right.
You know, and how far we've strayed from our founding fathers, how far we've strayed from the biblical root. My goodness, folks, it is time for us to get back. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us with more with Helmut after this. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Joby Gorgas with Magnum Research. I'm here to tell you a little bit about our new L5 and 44 mag. This is our 5-inch model, lightweight model. It's got an aluminum grip frame, shaving down the weight so that we can get it under 50 ounces so that it's New York legal. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to properly hold the L5 for function. When shooting a Desert Eagle, you want to make sure that your dominant arm is locked out, pushing back into the back of the grip. Your secondary hand is holding around the front of the grip to keep the muzzle flip down. This gives you a good firm hold for proper cycling. We got to remember that the Desert Eagle is a gas-operated rotating bolt semi-automatic pistol, not unlike an AR system. I also want to talk to you about the stance for shooting the Desert Eagle. When shooting the Desert Eagle, you need a good firm base, so you want to step into your direction, get that arm locked, that support hand on, and lean forward into it so that you can handle that recoil.
Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group, with a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today.
And we are back. Welcome back this Friday, November 17th, on this chilly, and a little bit overcast morning. We are back with Helmut talking about all manner of things, but look at this. He mentioned, of course, Helmut, you mentioned Horace Mann. Let's get a little history on this. The American public education system was directly imported from Prussia, modern-day Germany. This model of, quote, free and compulsory, end quote, education was designed by the Prussian emperor in order to generate obedient workers and soldiers who would not question his authority. In the 1830s, American lawmaker Horace Mann visited Prussia and researched its education methodology. He was infatuated with the emperor's method of eliminating free thought from his subjects and eliminating free thought from his subjects and designed an educational system for Massachusetts directly based on these concepts. The movement then quickly spread nationally. Here are some of the video clips of that, of the origins of the American public educational system and training young kids to become obedient to state education. I've never let schooling interfere with my education, Mark Twain said. But of course, let's look at this brief clip on
Now we come to the great man
Horace
himself.
Mann.
A man history records as being instrumental in the creation of America's public education system. Horace Mann was an American educator who served as a member of the
He's
U.S.
a
House of
globalist
Representatives.
and centralist.
part of
He's
the
a
American
control
Congress.
freak. He's a
Key
brainwasher.
reformer of the education system at the time. In 1837,
1837?
he became the head of the newly created Board of Education in Massachusetts, where he began the work that would eventually earn him the title as the father of American public education.
This is the father of
After
American
reading
public
from the educational
education,
models of
and he
different
got it
countries,
from
Mann finally hears about a
Prussia.
particularly successful style that had been developed in Prussia, which is now modern-day Germany. The Prussian system had shown to be such a success for the government's purposes that, accompanied by a few other educators, Horace Mann travels to Germany to investigate. Upon their return to the United States, they lobbied heavily to have the Prussian model adopted.
All in favor, say aye.
Interest in Prussia had also been growing in the northern half of the continent. Around this time, the Canadian Superintendent of Schools, Egerton Ryerson, traveled to Prussia in search of a new model of education. His journeys also included visiting Horace Mann in Massachusetts to further examine the system he would eventually adopt. George Brown, the editor of Toronto's Globe newspaper, was even quoted saying that Ryerson had successfully imported Prussian education into Ontario.
They admit it.
During the
They
next 30 years or
even
so,
openly
a whole line of
admit
American
what they're
dignitaries came
doing.
to Germany to earn degrees.
Okay, that's enough of that. But you can see how that's unbelievable. It's a brainwashing indoctrination system that eliminates critical thought and free thinking, because it's through that process that through our conscience we can eventually, at the end, search for God. Right? And that's the Kierkegaard talking about it as rationale leading up to the mountain, but in the end we had to take the leap of faith. But rationale and critical thinking and trying to question our existence, existential thoughts, existential thinking, lead us towards God in the end if we are able to have truth, access to truth. But of course, if you're not able to do even any type of free thought or critical thinking, and then it's indoctrinated into through the public education system, which they're telling you is free, but it's really indoctrination, it's brainwashing camp. No wonder, of course, and they take all the elements of biblical morality, all the elements of God, all the elements of God's grace and Christ's sacrifice and the blood he spilled for you. I mean, this undeserved grace, right? This incredible gift of love that we of human beings are receiving. And that's why we should, of course, love God and love our neighbor. But all this morality, all this central key morality is eliminated, and then you replace it with secular humanism and postmodern humanism, which then even has repercussions to the palliative care. We were talking with Ron Panzer, a 30-year in the nursing industry and organizes against euthanasia. And he was telling us the whole even medical model shifted because it used to be based on the Judeo-Christian model of trying to preserve life until God decided when it would expire, because there could be miracles during that time, there could be healing, there could be forgiveness, there could be repentance, whatever. And just having this sort of materialistic, artificial, synthetic, robotic view of human life and just control and preservation of resources is not the way. We have to, that's even happening in palliative care, where they're saying just kill the person, just kill the person. It's not, it's no longer, necessary. You know what I mean? And this has fundamental repercussions as we move from Judeo-Christianity to this postmodern culture. Repercussions throughout our entire civilization. Of course, education is a place you've been involved in. tell us how important that was for your thinking in terms of educating your young people, but also just generally speaking about public school and how it's become so deleterious to the youth because it left its Judeo-Christian values. What are your thoughts on that, Helmut?
Well, you actually have in Pennsylvania, for example, right now, you've got 4 cases brought before the courts that the way the secular and the public school system is interpreting the courts are the separation of church and state. That's not what the founding fathers meant it to be. So, but the way they're interpreting it, and public schools in several cases have been, secular humanism has been considered a religion.
Yeah.
They've
Right.
ruled that. So therefore, the public schools are in violation the way they're interpreting it.
Wow, so they've ruled that secular humanism is religion.
Right. So
Wow, that's
we have
great.
the congressman, a couple of Christian congressmen here in the state have brought suit against it. It can't go to trial because they'd have to throw out the public schools, and that's not going to happen. But the whole aspect of tolerance and yes, you're supposed to tolerate everything except only if you agree with me. Just going back to some of the historical things, Adams, for example, he said to be what do you say? To be ignorant of the Bible is shameful, because granted we're not perfect and our systems aren't perfect, but we have an absolute standard. So when you get away from that, like when I was in seminary, a lot of people were writing exegetical studies. I wanted to do something that was very practical because I was also involved with sports and.
You were a great athlete, I heard. Football player and everything.
No, soccer.
You did soccer?
Soccer and wrestling.
Didn't you? Oh, you did wrestle. You did wrestle. I
Yeah.
thought you played
Well,
football.
I played real football.
Oh, you played real
Soccer.
You played soccer football. In America, we call that soccer.
Right. It's football everywhere else in the world. Okay. No, but so I wrote mine on biblical integration in athletics. It was a 12-page working manual. Implemented that on a secular level at the community. We had started a league years back, and I also coached one of the teams.
Nice.
In God's blessing, we went 12 years undefeated.
Wow, what is your secret? You're teaching them biblical morality.
Right. We were the approach was entirely different. I was speaking at a sports banquet up in the Scranton area, and a couple of coaches came out and said, "Can you teach us what you do?" And I said, "I'd love to teach you, but you're not willing to do what I do."
Well, they made it illegal.
No, well, yeah, actually,
You
it was
can't
funny.
mention the Bible. It's illegal.
It was interesting. The president of the league came up to me one day, and I always had 2 assistant coaches, and he said, "Oh, we got a problem." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, one parent complained you used the word God in practice."
Oh my
And I
goodness.
said, my statement to the student, you have no idea what your potential is. God has created you with all kinds of abilities. But in this case, my 2 assistant coaches got on his case that
Oh my gosh.
we had other coaches showing up that were drunk, that were using lewd illustrations, foul language. And you come to me because I use the word God? That takes
that?
a lot of nerve. Now, he backed off. And I said,
That's
you got to
incredible.
get some backbone and stand up to some of these people. But
That's-
for 12 years, going undefeated. But I said, you don't know your kids. I knew what they were doing in school. I knew the parents. We got to meet and to have an impact on their lives. Somebody said, "Oh, you were very successful." I said, No. You're looking at sports and a record. That's not success to me. My success is how many of these kids I'm taking into eternity
Yes.
and instilling a fruit of the Spirit, a Christ-like character trait in their lives. And having the parents began to realize the impact, and somebody said, "Well, you're really tough on these kids." I said, "You're right." I said, somebody has commented, my wife said to me, "Oh, well, you're really mean." She came to a practice. And I said, "You're right." I said, "Why am I the only coach that has a waiting list of kids trying to get on the team?"
Exactly.
Kids appreciate the
It's
standards.
transformative.
Excuse me?
Transformative.
Right, and demanding. We don't expect enough of our children.
Exactly.
And,
Well, hardship is abuse apparently nowadays.
Oh,
Making
well,
your children, go through hardship and experience, getting mentally tough
Mm-hmm.
is apparently abuse.
well, we did the will and distress camping, one of the ministries I was involved in. We would take kids out of the jail system. we would take whatever the courts would give us. We would take 12 of them. We would take a JD officer with us. We had him for 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, our system produced 10 or 11 the courts would never see again out of the 12.
Wow.
After doing this a couple times, this we were doing down in Virginia, out in the Outer Banks. We were all over the country doing different things. And the judge said, we're not doing this anymore. I said, well, it was free. Your JD officers love it. I had local businessmen fund it. And he said, well, you're putting people out of work.
You know what gets me? How is it that you can't mention, and you can't even say God, like you said, God created you for this, and you can't even say something like that. Yet you can literally preach to children about hypersexualizing them, transgenderism, how that's normal.
Right.
You kids should dress and cross-dress. You should be drag queens. You can say, join the homosexual club afterwards if you're interested in different sexual activity. You can say this to children. You get 5 years old in kindergarten in Chicago using the UN Public Health and Science Sexual education program. 5-year-old children, they're teaching how to masturbate and oral sex and anal sex. I mean, what are these people? They're totally possessed by Satan. It's not only they're on drugs, they're totally possessed by Satan. How is it that you can't even say God created an image, he has a purpose for your life? You can't say something like that, but you can say, go join the homosexual club. That's incredible.
Well, it's been so watered down all over. I have a copy of Daniel Webster's dictionary, the original, and if you've ever seen it, it's about that thick. And on every word, every page, he uses illustrations to demonstrate that particular word, how it's used. Invariably, the illustrations will have a quote from Scripture.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
And then a lot of the founding fathers were in teaching that. Even, let's say, Dwight Eisenhower, he was the only president that ever prayed at his own inauguration.
Wow, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and then going back to 1953, he was also, 54, he put it, under God into the pledge. Then he also put, in God we trust, in 1956 on the money.
Yeah, yes.
Then we have the National Prayer Breakfast and so forth. It's mostly from broadcasters and so forth, the Christian broadcasters. But the constant, even in Washington, D.C., I know a friend of mine is a staff historian for the Park Service, and he was saying that in D.C. alone, they've removed over half of the engravings and monuments to our founding fathers. But they're not teaching that in the schools. These kids have no idea. Most of the kids you ask, they have no idea why we celebrate Thanksgiving. And that's coming up.
You can't have the 10 Commandments in a public space.
But the Supreme Court will have it up behind them.
You can't have a nativity scene in your public space, but you can put a Baphomet 12-foot statue of a Satan god in the public space. What the heck? What is going on here? This is absolute loony bin lunacy. What is it? The people in the white straitjackets are running the loony bin. Right. It's absolutely insane. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about how you would train, of course, your young people when you took them into the wilderness with the jail program?
We stripped life down. We controlled their diet. We always had experts. Like we might do whitewater rafting. We might do rappelling, spelunking.
Wow. Different adventurous things.
As far as they knew, they were 1,000 miles from civilization. But what they didn't know is we could, if something actually did happen, safety was a key factor, obviously, primary. Right. But we could pull them out within a matter of minutes if we had to.
What was the age group of these students?
The age group was like a high school age.
Oh, interesting. Nice.
Yeah. But whatever the courts would give us, and I know in my discussion with him, when he mentioned to me, the judge goes, "Oh, we're not going to do this anymore because you're putting people out of work." I couldn't believe that he actually said it.
That's unbelievable.
Right. But when we spoke, he goes,
"Golly,
that wasn't the issue." I said, "Look, forget about that. Your JD officers love it. This system is working. They were getting they were considered successful if they got 10 to 15% success. We were doing the exact opposite. We were getting 85 to 90% success. I said, your system, be a pragmatist. Your system isn't working. Ours is. And what's happened was they negated all that. He said what he didn't like was the spiritual factors.
Well, you have to be shut down because you're too successful, and you're not going to help those. You're going to help those kids not go back to prison.
Right.
And the prisons are run by private companies. Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
And
you said it crazy.
You've seen in the news and in the media how a lot of the business, the judges are putting them in because of the kickbacks and money. The more people they put into the jail system, rather than really trying to help them.
Do you know that 90% of the prisoners in jail are young people with non-violent offenses? Non-violent offenses.
I didn't know that.
That's crazy. I mean, that we have the biggest prison population in the world, bigger than China.
Per capita.
Bigger than per capita. Than China.
What's a bigger business?
It's told, and it's owned by private companies. It's a business.
Well, the education, going back to the educational system, it's about the money. It's not about the education.
About
every 10 years they'll change because we have to bring a new curriculum, and they tell the parents this is for the children. It's never about the children. It's always either about the administrative, or they're top heavy, the ridiculous salaries that the administrative people are getting. But it's not about the kids. It's about the money. And then you really find out where people's hearts are when they start talking about money. But, you know, with the lack of standards, well, we've killed over 60 million people just through the abortions and so forth.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
We wiped out a whole generation. So, you know, just taking a stand on having, there's an attack on families. There's an attack on just the absolute standards. Somebody says, well, we have to be tolerant of everything. Somebody said to me one day, he said, oh, well, you're intolerant. I said, absolutely, I'm intolerant. I'm intolerant of lying and of deception and so many other things. And you tolerate everything.
Well, you know what happened? Even we have a sister who was a public school teacher, and she just mentioned something along the lines like Christianity and Islam are not the same. She said something like that, which is a true statement. Mm-hmm. And then a Muslim student, reported her to the school board, whatever it is.
Right.
She was fired. She was fired for saying that Christianity and Islam are not the same. This is in Pennsylvania.
Right.
This is incredible.
A friend of mine who teaches in one of the better, quote unquote, better school districts in the area, it's a job, but they're pulling their own children also. It's so horrible. They're pulling out whatever it takes to educate my child, whether it's homeschooling, whether it's private school and so forth. And
how amazing!
Parents have no idea what's going on.
They have no clue. I mean, now I think people are starting to wake up to it a little more with alternative news, etc. But still, even in this area, I know that the public school system has so much clout because, it has a very high rating in the public school system, nationally, and they have, this or that graduation rate, whatever. But it's like with Common Core and what the federal government was trying to push on the people, they were trying to put multicultural classes in there, okay? And they were trying to put, quote, non-tolerant education in there, to get rid of to teach, indoctrinate, quote, tolerance, okay? And teach, brainwash multicultural relativism. Brigitte Gabriel exposed this. They were teaching in multicultural religions class, okay, which they were saying that has to be mandated to understand a complex society and a complex world for our new leaders, right? This is how they sell it. They're teaching in the class on religions. They're teaching the children have to go to a Muslim mosque. They have to quote the Shahada, which is the Declaration of Faith. Mm-hmm. They have to then pretend in one of the exercises that they're a Muslim jihadi who's being victimized by Christian crusaders. When it was the Muslims who were invading Europe and the Christians were defending Europe, it was not an offensive war. They're teaching literally, it's the hijacking of history, the hijacking of reality, imposing this false reality and this false narrative into young people, making them feel that they're against this Christian hegemony, which they have to fight and ally with all these, quote, victimized cultures to fight and destroy and eradicate, because that's the bad, intolerant culture. I mean, this is they're using taxpayer money to train our kids like this. It's incredible. Did you see the statistics? 53% of now young people, millennials, would rather live in a socialist and communist country, even though they've never been to one.
Right. Yeah, I've lectured in South America and in Europe at the university level on education, on theology, and so forth. But it was always fascinating. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Germany, and we became.
Oh, you were born in Germany.
Right, we were assimilated here. You wanted to be part of this, be an American.
Yeah.
And for example, at the time when in East Germany at the time, in speaking, and it was interesting in the class at the University of Magdeburg. In the back of the class is a party member sitting there. The professor was in the front of the class, and they did a little review for the class. It wasn't a review, it was to prep them for me speaking next. And they talked about socialism, how wonderful it is. Everybody votes over there, but if you don't vote, the police come to your house, you know. And but it was interesting, even because the Russian troops were all over the place. Even under the czars, as bad as it was in some respects, the Russian people never starved. Under Stalin, who killed over 100 million, people, 80 million or 100 million. I can't remember the exact number, but it was much for it. It makes Hitler look like a amateur at what he did. But life is wonderful here. Life is perfect. And but they, aside from discussing a little bit, a couple of minutes of the political issues, the young people didn't care. They wanted to know what we wear. They all thought we were either cowboys or gangsters, first of all, and they didn't know. But I always find it interesting here in the States when people complain about this country and the problems. I said, "You're right. We have problems." And for me to admit that, to a socialist, was like, "You're not supposed to admit that." Yeah, we have things that we need to improve on, but we're willing to be open about it. Of course, your life is perfect. Yeah, you go to Cuba, go to Venezuela, go to
North Korea, right?
Yeah, and North Korea, right? I said, and then when they complain here, I said, "Have you ever lived anywhere else?" No. I said, "Don't go for a visit. Go live there for 6 months, a year.
Exactly.
Tell me how wonderful it is." They won't do that. Now, all the people, even in this election, they're all, well, if Trump gets elected, we're all going to rush to Canada. Well, I'm going to get myself in trouble here. Well, Canada is a socialistic country also. And
with all the billions, yeah.
Yeah, and they're allowing all the people pouring in because they have a massive country they need workers. But you saw what happened in France and Germany. It's making a disaster.
It's imploding.
And a lot of the countries have just shut down.
Oh, we had Dr. Bill Warner on, who was an expert on political Islam.
Right.
And this is one of the modalities of jihad, is displacement, by changing the population demographics and basically going in, repopulating, taking the women, and multiplying your way into the majority. Mm-hmm. This is one of the modalities of jihad.
We had a conference last year where I had one of the fellows who was one of the leaders in Lebanon, and in Syria, and now he's a pastor actually in Canada, but his whole background, he was one of the leaders with it wasn't ISIS, but with the very militant groups, and his life is in jeopardy because of all that, but yet he showing exactly what you were saying about how changing the whole population and so forth, and they're controlling these things. A lot of this, and as you probably know, they've tried to impose Sharia law in
the UK.
Here also.
Here, yes,
right. It here.
Well, they have like a soft version of it because you have political correctness where you can't insult Islam. And even though there's a mass terror attack, they always say if there's a mass terror attack and it is a jihadi, then they say, it helps Islam because then they can say, don't be intolerant. It's not about Islam. They can do that, right? So the apologists win there. And even if it's not jihadi related, like when the vehement atheist shot up the Texas church just 2 weeks ago, and of course he was a Bible study, so that means he's Christian. Even though he was a vehement atheist, still they want to say he's a Bible study teacher. This guy who comes in and kills people, then the jihadis win again, the Muslim apologists win again, because they can say, oh, look, you are now, you don't attack Christians when they kill. You don't attack white people when they kill. You only attack Muslims. See, both ways, either which way, any mass terror attack now, and David Wood made a video on this, nice video on this, any mass terror attack actually helps Islam now. It helps silence everybody about criticizing anything about Islam and its jihadi nature. And of course, this is in the public schools. This is in our educational system now, which is now indoctrination camp. Why don't we go to tax credits where parents can choose between whether or not they want to send their children with the tax credits to public school or private school or religious school or vocational school or homeschooling? Why don't we give parents the opportunity to choose?
Well, there again, the school system and our government really wants to destroy the family.
Yeah.
That dependency on government, or we know better than you do, really. Every time they've touched something, the government, they've made a mess out of it.
Every single time.
And it continues. And I'm not so sure I want to relinquish that right of the rearing of my children to the government. It's just a constant contradiction. We're getting back to the biblical standards. Well, we can't have standards. It's just frustrating. But at the same time, I said, you need to stay active. What happens a lot of times, we tend to blend into our culture.
Yes.
Because we're intimidated by the pressure or the financial. I know I've had situations in the past where I'm working with her. I was working for another national company, and the owner asked me to do something that was dishonest and lie about it, and I couldn't do that. So you walk away from the job.
Right.
People say, how could you do that? I mean, you take a 50% cut in pay. I said, if you're willing to relinquish your own character, your own integrity, I said, you've got nothing left.
Exactly.
And what kind of role model? Now, what's encouraging is to see, I have 3 sons. They're all married. And they're all leaders in the community. They're all involved in ministries. Their lives are committed to helping and serving other people. And mostly because of their relationship with Christ. It's like in Ephesians 8, for by grace are you saved, through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. Their whole commitment is, it's not about this. We're just passing through. We're moving into eternity. That's where it really counts. And but the whole family structure is constantly under attack.
Under threat. There's an order. There's a spiritual order God gives, right? Scripture has a spiritual order. God in Christ, Christ in man, man over woman, woman over children. There is a spiritual order in the family, and it's basically a tactical unit to destroy Satan's kingdom. But what happens is Satan, of course, then uses powers and different structures to go after that, destroy families, destroy fathers, get fathers out of the home. In order to get welfare payments, you have to divorce your man. You have to get rid of the man in the house. You can't have a husband in the house. And so, of course, divorce rate skyrockets when it's being incentivized and being rewarded. It's unbelievable.
Well, it's like the cohabitation epidemic that we're dealing with now. And
cohabitation, right.
Yeah, it's destroying not only families, but they think that that's better. But the stats on that are the exact opposite. The infidelity is 4 or 5 times higher with people who are cohabitating. The guy, the girls cheating on each other. Marriage has been downplayed, and yes, there are problems. You work through it. I mean, I love my wife. My biggest influence on my sons is how I love their mother.
Yes.
But the opposite is also the case. People say, well, I also do premarital counseling.
But you're the head of the house. You're the head of the house.
The buck stops here, right?
And you love your family as Christ loved the church. Right. You're the head. And that kind of biblical father is so critical. That's the enemy of Satan. Because he is the Christ in the family. The representative of Christ in the family.
One of the things I have in my office, I have a sign that says, we are what we continually do. Therefore, excellence is not an act, but a habit. And I said, not perfect. You know, I make mistakes and so forth, but, and you admit those mistakes to your own children and apologize.
Very important.
And I think it's helped them to realize I don't have to be perfect.
Yes.
But I do have to strive for excellence. I do have to strive to become more Christ-like in my character.
Yes.
And those kind of things it was interesting. As they were growing up, we communicated. But when they turned 21, 22, then we became friends. But a lot of the parents, I was telling them, I said, the friend comes later. Right now, be a parent. And
That's right.
The kids
God call you to be a dad.
Yeah, the kids are raising the parents. And
Exactly.
Well, when I shut down, I had another business, and when I shut it down about 2 years ago, there's a school superintendent that I had known. I had coached there 1 year at the high school. It was the only year they went to the districts for the soccer team. So she said, we need help. Could you sub? I said, I can't do that. She said, why not? I'd have to kill one of them. I said, you've lost control of the classroom.
Yeah,
The inmates
yeah.
are running the asylum.
There we go.
The interesting part is she acknowledged it and she says, you know, you're right.
Well, this is what happened with our out of control, federal bureaucracy as well, the deep state. Wow, the inmates are really running the asylum. And Trump is trying to do whatever he can to try to get America back on track. Well, folks, that's it. That we are out of time on this broadcast. Helmut, we have so many incredible things that we covered. Any last words, any websites that people can go visit to help your organizations or to just check out what you're doing?
What I'm doing, I'm in working with another company that's doing marketing. To me, it's a vehicle to help other businesses and other ministries, and so we work with a lot of churches, Christian camps, and so forth. But we also we do the whole state of Texas, California.
Wow.
For different companies. We do about 400 trucking companies, a lot of universities all over the country. But to me, it's just a vehicle. We have a vehicle there to help people.
Yes.
And
That's what
we're
it's
here
all
to
about.
serve. We're here to serve.
Love your neighbor. Love God, love your neighbor. Thank you so much, Helmut, for being with us this morning. Thank you all for joining us on today's broadcast. We'll see you tomorrow, 5 a.m. sharp. Remember, the Bible says, let no man take thy crown. I'm sorry. Tomorrow is Tuesday. Right. So we will see you on Monday back at the Gaines Report. Monday, 5 a.m. sharp. God bless, Godspeed, and may his kingdom come. All right.